everyone, I'm Alex Rude, and I'm going to be your host today for May Variety Hour. We have some great speakers lined up today, including some speed talks from Amir Patel, Browne, Kelsey Prediger, and Ben Weinstein. So first off, I'm going to pass it over to Amir to kick things off by sharing more about enabling field biomechanics through multimodal sensor function. Very cool. So Amir, whenever you're ready to take it away, floor is yours.
Hi everyone. Thanks for coming to my quick talk. I'll do my best to distill everything that we are working on or have been working on for the last, I guess, over 10 years. Today I'm going to be talking about how we can do, or how we've been trying to do biomechanics outside of a lab environment. And I always start because, showing off this incredible animal called the cheetah, which I'm actually from South Africa and been studying him for most of my life, trying to understand, how they are able to be so maneuverable and how, they're able to pull off these incredible feats of agility. Because I really was interested at the start, I guess, to build the next generation of robotic systems. But in doing so, I discovered that there wasn't actually much known about cheetah biomechanics, particularly from like a whole body perspective. So in my lab, we study this animal along multiple fronts. So we develop multi-body simulations, we employ feedback control and optimization techniques, and then we also build robots to understand, functional morphology and so on. But today what I'm going to be talking about, which is I guess the most difficult part of this work, is actually trying to understand and measure what the animal is actually doing out in the wild, which is we use lots of techniques in computer vision and state estimation. So I started my journey trying to, get some data on how these animals move. And the first thing was, okay, we should just put collars on them. But the problem with these GPS and IMU collars, many of you know, is that you get this animal with all of this articulation in its, legs and spine and tail and even its head. And it essentially reduces it just to, this like flying axis. So you've lost all of the information about, how it's able to perform these various maneuvers. So like, what kind of limb coordination does it require? What kind of flicks of the tail? So, GPS collars aren't going to work for these needs. So the first thing I did was I thought, okay, what if we put more sensors on the animal? So we developed this harness system, which we tried on some captive bred cheetahs in South Africa. And we developed a sensor fusion framework. And the cool thing is that we were then able to reconstruct the spine and tail motion without any external cameras on the cheetah. So you can see at the bottom there. So how it works is we have some backwards facing cameras on the harness, which are looking at the spine and the tail. And we also have an IMU and GPS system on there. So this is what it looks like. This is some footage if you ever want to know what it's like to ride on the back of a cheetah. So this is not sped up or anything. So yeah, we were able to do this full reconstruction, but unfortunately, many of the cheetahs found it a bit cumbersome to have this harness. So what we thought of is we need to do a fully remote non-contact system. So luckily, we partnered with GoPro, and they gave us a ton of cameras, which we then placed in cheetah sanctuaries in South Africa. We then collected lots of data, and like I think 3 years worth of video footage. However, many of the cheetahs we weren't allowed to put any, reflective markers on. So I managed to meet these really smart people, Mackenzie and Alexander Mathis, who are now at EPFL, developed DeepLabCut, and we extended DeepLabCut to work outside in 3D environments. So I don't know if some of you may have heard of DeepLabCut, but how it works is we take a video and then the neural network can label the 2D key points, so the skeleton in the frame. So what we did in this example was we take all 6 views, which DeepLabCut the same network labels, and then we fuse that to create this, I guess, like full 3D skeletal reconstruction, but outdoors. So I was really excited when I saw this because you can see that's clearly the motion of the cheetah. The red dot is the lure that it's chasing during enrichment. So really, really cool, cool stuff. So the other part we had one problem we had was that the cheetahs we were working with didn't have the same motivations as the wild ones. So I approached GoPro to develop a long-range motion capture system called Wild Pose. And the idea here was that we were going to use long-range LiDAR, actually used in autonomous or self-driving cars, and fuse that with a telephoto high-speed video camera. And got some really cool results. So we went to Kalahari National Park in South Africa on a couple of field trips. So we got some really cool video footage, obviously, cool stuff with lions and springbok over there. But the cool part is now we also have this 3D LiDAR point cloud data. So you can see that's our giraffe at the top there, but we also now have time synchronized, calibrated 3D points. So we can do really, really cool things. Some examples like we can study, group dynamics. So by viewing a herd from the side, we can track how individuals interacting with one another. So you can see the, individual 6 and 7 or fighting and then they go off. And so really, really cool applications. Another one, which we sort of stumbled on, we had this lion sleeping on the side of the road. It was about 60 meters away. And we could then actually track its breathing by measuring the displacement on its chest. So quite interesting kind of application I didn't expect. And then obviously my real passion is we could then study things like hunting. So this is a cheetah mother taking down a springbok with its cubs. So on the left you see the video, but on the right we also have the 3D points, which we can now fuse to get 3D whole body kinematics outdoors from really far away. So yes, that was my quick talk. I know I went through really quickly, but I just wanted to make sure that I covered everything so there was enough time for questions. If you are interested in any of my work, please check out my email, and thanks to my sponsors and funders for generously supporting this work. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Really, really cool. Very interesting. The whole POV in the back of a cheetah is awesome. My question for you is if someone, what do you want people to come and like talk to you about? Like, are there any like future collaborations that you're looking to sort of like investigate, or like what makes you super excited that you would want to talk to someone about for hours on end
Yeah. So
about this work?
thanks. Yeah. So I'm actually an engineer. So like I said, I my journey was I came from this as a robotics person trying to build faster robots, and I kind of stumbled into this world. So I'd be really interested to see, are these technologies like useful? Because I'm often a bit worried that the kind of things that we're developing are cool tech innovations, but maybe they're not like really useful for people. So like I think I'd love to hear if anybody's actually interested in these kinds of things for the application. I mean, obviously it doesn't have to be cheetahs, it could be anything, to see how like multi-sensor fusion could be useful for them.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for that talk. Next up, we have our next speed talk from Luke Browne, and he is going to be walking us through Chocó Forest Watch, which is a free open source web application designed to lower the technical barriers to high resolution deforestation and land use monitoring for conservationists. But you're already ahead of me. Take it away, Luke, whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Alex, and thanks, Jake and Wild Labs, for the invite to come talk about Chocó Forest Watch, which is a project I'm working on in collaboration with FCAT, which is I'll talk more about later. So I'm going to start with place, because this is very much a place-based project, and then I'll talk about the technology. And so this is all really developed to focus on the western forests of Ecuador, the Chocó Forest of Ecuador, which over the past century or so has really been totally fragmented and devastated from a conservation point of view, where only about 5% of the forest cover remains by some estimates. And you end up with a landscape like this with tons of fragmentations, a few patches of forest driven by a lot of agricultural expansion from cacao or palm oil or farmers who are really just trying to make a living and support their families. And so that's where FCAT comes in. FCAT is an NGO based in Ecuador. We're community based. Most of our members are members of the local community. We work really hard to try to come up with solutions that improve local well-being and also have good outcomes for nature. And we have sort of three prongs. One is scientific research. One is capacity building of both local communities and also international researchers and students. And then also a big community engagement program with youth education and supporting women. And I wanted to make this plug because I think this is a good audience for this. We run a 750 hectare reserve in Western Ecuador with the field station. So if you have some sort of product or technology or approach that you want to test out, we don't have cheetahs, but we have a lot of other cool stuff there that this is, I'd be happy to chat and see if we could work together on testing out stuff in the field in challenging conditions. So it makes a good test bed for that. So why do we care about forest monitoring? Hopefully I don't need to motivate this too much for this crowd, but I do want to just make the case that at least for FCAT, what we're interested in is conservation planning. We're doing a big biodiversity corridor project, and we're looking for areas where we can target restoration and conservation. Also, increasingly, it's becoming important for deforestation-free products and marketing, like the EUDR, and also the carbon markets for validation monitoring. And then also, we're interested in the scientific impacts on biodiversity. So having an underlying forest cover map is super important for all those things. And so when we go out to look for forest cover maps of Western Ecuador, this is sort of what we're dealing with, where this part of the world is super humid and wet and just covered in clouds most of the time. And so we've just over the past decade or so have had a lot of trouble getting reliable maps of forest cover until a few years ago where Planet came out with their satellite array, and we started seeing these much clearer images of the sort of zone that we're working in. And then the other sort of amazing development was this NICV program where they made this imagery freely available to everyone across the tropics in sort of monthly mosaics. So we saw this as a huge opportunity for us because, we're interested in a pretty small area and we're finally getting clear imagery. And so we didn't do anything sort of revolutionary in terms of the analytics here, but basically what we did is we went through and built our own land classification model of drawing polygons of where there's forest, not forest, fitting an XGBoost machine learning model, and then doing change over time analysis. And what we found is we were finally able to see the FCAT reserve is the orange outline in the middle. We were finally able to see like really high quality forest cover maps of the area that we're interested in, and also detect deforestation events at a spatial resolution that we've never been able to see before. And what we found is that when we compare this to other sort of global benchmarks like the Global Forest Watch deforestation alerts, which I love Global Forest Watch, and they just suffer from a lot of problems in this area because of the trade-offs between having a global model that works everywhere versus having a more regional or localized approach. Is that we're finding deforestation estimates about 7 times higher than what's being reported, and that matches what we see in the field where deforestation is still rampant. So that was sort of the birth of the idea of Chocó Forest Watch, which is a web application, interactive web application, and also a machine learning pipeline to scale this high resolution forest monitoring across Western Ecuador, and also detect deforestation hotspots like this at a 4.7 meter resolution using this Planet imagery. And so who is this for? I mean, all the underlying code is all open source. So everyone, the conservation technology community is definitely some of the stakeholders, but more specifically, we're part of the Chocó Alliance, which is a network of 13 NGOs in Western Ecuador that manage about 35,000 hectares. And this tool is really developed for us to keep track and monitoring our own reserves. And also I want to thank all the support that we've gotten from different initiatives, including Global Forest Watch. So normally we don't get a chance to talk about the sort of nerdy tech stuff at talks like this, but I do just want to mention the tech stack involved here, a Vue front end, a Django backend. And since the NICV Planet contract ended a few months ago, we've had to sort of pivot big time to host our own imagery. And so streaming in that imagery using Tyler. And also wanted to mention the challenges if you're not familiar, this contract between Planet and NICV ended. And so our access to the imagery was interrupted. And then the technical complexity of going from something like a Python script to a whole front-end, back-end web application is not a trivial process, but we're sort of living in a really amazing time of AI-assisted coding that really reduces that barrier to entry. So in terms of how this is performing, these are all sort of preliminary results, but what we're seeing is that the Chocó Forest Watch R composite map is in the green compared to other sort of global tree cover, forest cover benchmarks. It has a higher accuracy than the other ones, and you see the same thing with like F1 scores. And an increased spatial resolution, which is key too for planning. And one interesting thing is if we compare it to the WRI tree cover and the second one, the accuracy is very close, within 0.3%. But when you go to look at the actual data in this area that we're interested in, you see these big gaps, right? These sort of blocks of missing data. So even the accuracy is similar. What we're able to do is sort of fill in those gaps. And when you're, a nonprofit or doing on-the-ground conservation at small spatial scales, and your reserve or whatever falls within one of those gaps, that's a problem, obviously. And then that's the problem that we're trying to solve with Chocó Forest Watch. So With that, thank you. I'd love to hear from anyone or connect after too.
Thank you so much for that talk. We've got some comments in the chat, mostly just congratulating you on doing cool work. I guess same question for you. Like what makes you most excited in the for like the future of this work? Like yeah, that's my question. Like what are you most excited about?
Yeah, I think, I was a little bit inspired by Amir, like the multi-sensor fusion stuff is interesting to me. That's not something that we've integrated into this, but the idea that we could have, like RGB imagery on top of something like radar that can penetrate through the clouds to detect deforestation and sort of fusing different types of sensors at different spatial resolutions. That's not a step that we've taken yet, but that sort of thing I think has some potential.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a subtle forest theme of today's of today's variety hour, which is exciting. At least I think so, based on my understanding of what these talks are. So thank you so much for getting that started. And it looks like we have some questions in the chat for you from Frank, but I'm going to pop you in there to
Okay.
get that answered. Because it's time for our final speed talk of the day from Kelsey Prediger. And Kelsey is very generously joining us from the field in her car. And we are really excited to hear from her as this has been, I think, a talk that's been in the works since September. Kelsey, take it away.
I had to drive to the cell phone tower, but I'm going to jump into it. So, a big part of what I do is engaging with Indigenous communities and using their traditional knowledge combined with technology for monitoring and protecting pangolins in southern Africa. So, currently, I'm literally in the middle of the bush in Namibia, near one of our research centers. And so, first, I just want to kind of talk about why we're working with Indigenous communities and combining that with technology. Because we're here in the Nine Eye Conservancy, which is an important location within the Kavango Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area. Here we work with the Indigenous San people, who are some of the absolute best trackers in the world in terms of tracking spoor, because their traditional hunting methods include using a poison dart, and the animal will die in a few days, so they have to track it to be able to collect the meat. And we got interested in this area because that means they can also track for poaching, as pangolins are the most trafficked mammal in the world. There's often confiscations of up to 9 to 30 tons at a time, which could be anywhere from 5,000 to 20,000 individuals. And so we work with these Indigenous communities and utilize their knowledge of wildlife and the bush, and combine that with modern technology. And so they help us track the animals to be able to fit transmitters and use camera trapping methodology. So the technology I'm using isn't quite yet as advanced as some of the other presenters today, but I'm excited to share some ways we could maybe connect on that. So we employ pangolin guardians in the local villages, and they help track and monitor the animals. And we actually train them to tag the animals with satellite and VHF transmitters that help us collect spatial data to get us an insight into their home range sizes and movement, as well as protect them from poaching. Um, and so they've all been trained in using VHF telemetry and camera traps to monitor burrows. We're also working with wildlife protection services in AI for detection of pangolins and other burrowing animals like aardvarks. We regularly get honey badgers, all kinds of different species. And so the pangolin guardians essentially do the field work for us, and the pangolin guardians are employed in their local villages. So they protect the pangolins and then collect this data. So some of the ways that we utilize technology with the Indigenous communities is first and foremost the VHF and GPS technology, but they also utilize Earth Ranger by monitoring their patrols, data collection, and all of that. So here you can see a nice picture where they have been tagging the pangolins for us. So we've tagged quite a few animals in the area, in the villages that they're living in. And then all of this data plugs back into our understanding of the species. They also collect other interesting information, as I mentioned, on Earth Rangers. So we're actually very certain there's new species we're identifying in this area, and also rarely seen species. But because they're out collecting bush food and traditionally hunting, they regularly come across rare and unique biodiversity that many people have never seen. Another thing that they utilize technology for is like logging human wildlife conflict. So if you look, there's like a picture of an elephant that's actually raiding a crop field. This is just a statistic on our community engagement that since we had a nice big soccer tournament for the communities, our reports of pangolins significantly improved. So we actually use the communities themselves to track the wildlife and see the wildlife, and they report it back to us. And so since the soccer tournament last year, we were able to tag 10 additional individuals with satellite and VHF transmitters. And from that, we use this data in applied research to inform conservation planning and other things. So to date, we've tagged 18 resident pangolins, and we've recorded the largest pangolin home range, and a lot of firsts for biodiversity conservation. So like I said, I'm a little bit with my presentation, not as techy as the rest, but we do use camera trapping, VHF and sat tags, and a lot of different applications. And as more applications are being developed, we're employing those as well in our research. So here's just some interesting information. We've got like bats at burrows, which is the first record in Namibia. We've got new habitats with pangolins tagged in, and a lot of rare stuff. So here's just like a fun kind of camera trap video that's actually recorded 7 species within less than 7 days, which is pretty cool. We've got aardvark. Oops, sorry. We've got aardvark, pangolin, porcupine, mongoose, bat, I think guinea fowl, and genet. And we're actually on the way towards also using acoustic monitoring for detecting further species, because ultimately what we're doing in this area is using the indigenous knowledge of the bush and tracking to protect biodiversity, which is actually really exciting because we just hit over 800 species for the area. So we use iNaturalist to record species. And the nice thing is that it's got the AI technology that can help us identify, plus all the experts. As of this morning, we hit 804 species with over 2,400 observations and 59 observers. So this is not only us and our team, but sometimes we've got tourists passing through, but then also all the local pangolin guardians who record this data on their phones, who might not know what species it is. A lot of them don't even speak English. But they're able to harness iNaturalist and its AI technology to help log and protect these species. And like I said, we actually are getting a great motivation to get more researchers out here, because there's some new species we're finding as well. So I know I'm probably getting close to being out of time. I just want to mention that like some of the challenges we face are tag failures, especially when it comes to battery limitations and a vast landscape with very few roads and a lot of major threats. Elephants often impact our ability to walk in the felds because they're in the way and dangerous to us, as well as just large distances from roads and the heat. So sometimes it tips over 40 degrees Celsius, and so tracking pangolins in the daytime is tricky. Tracking at night is dangerous with elephants and lions and other things. Um, and so this is a question that maybe I'd love to hear more feedback on. I'll save it for the end because I just wanted to touch on, I'm really interested to chat more with Amir about maybe some algorithms, pangolin movement that would make smart tags and save us tag energy, because right now we're limited in our transmitters battery life because satellite energy, just to get the pinpoint and send it back up, it takes a lot of energy, and they're mostly nocturnal, and we have to program the fixes based on their activity, but their activity shifts based on weather, and so it's very hard for us to optimally program the tags. So I would really love anybody that might be interested to work more on developing transmitters that are motion activated, based on their behavior, because they spend most of their time underground. And when we have fixes that happen underground. It's like your cell phone looking for network and you can't connect. So it drains the battery twice as much. So we're lucky if we even get 6 months out of a tag. So it's quite expensive satellite technology. So I'd love for anybody to reach out if you've got some ideas. But yeah, I think that would be, one of my questions to pose is like, if anybody has any ideas. We've had a few leads, but unfortunately during COVID, the limited access to satellite boards ended the project that I was working on, looking for smart technology for pangolins. But yeah, I think that I'll end it there. I don't want to go over in time. And yeah, we're doing quite a lot of interesting things with technology. And in the future, I hope to be doing more with habitat modeling and AI from that spatial data that these GPS tags are collecting. We also are looking to implement drones in some of our data collection and monitoring. And as I mentioned, a big goal is to get tags that save energy, to have a longer battery life, and be more, financially viable as well as sustainable.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for that talk. That was awesome. And like the Pangolin Conservation and Research Foundation was one of like our, I think either community choice awardees or something for Tech for Wildlife this past year. We love what you're doing. Love integrating tech with Indigenous knowledge and community engagement. It's awesome. And awesome call to action for you from the community on collaborations and whatnot. And I encourage you to also share that call to action on Wild Labs to see if maybe anybody who wasn't able to join Variety Hour has any ideas for ways to work together. But thank you so much. That was our last speed talk for Variety Hour today. So I'm gonna steal screen sharing from you if I can.
Oh,
I
please
can.
do.
Cool. So right now we are going to move on to ad break. Okay, welcome to ad break. During ad break, we have some events, community events, and news and updates to share with you. So first off, Adrian from the Wild Labs team is heading to Botswana on a personal vacation. But while he's there, he's co-organizing a meetup that's going to be happening on June 4th from 6 to 11 p.m. And it's going to be sort of a typical Wild Labs meetup, so networking opportunities and whatnot, but also with the opportunity to share a short 5-minute, one-slide presentation on the work that you do. So someone should be sharing a link in the chat soon to this Wild Labs page the event page where you can register and make note of if you are interested in presenting. So I encourage anybody who's in the area or knows anybody in the area who might be interested in joining to register and come. It's very exciting. I think this is our first meetup in Botswana, so that is awesome. Next up, Wild Labs is co-hosting an event with WWF on June 5th to discuss how practitioners are using EleanorData.org to strengthen governance and management of conservation data. There's going to be some speakers from different WWF country offices as well as from WCS. And same thing, there should be a link being sent to the Wild Labs event page to register for that. Should be very interesting. Talia is going to be doing a quick talk during this event. So if you're available and interested, I encourage you to register and attend. Next up is that very exciting news. Our applications for becoming a 2025 to 2026 Wild Labs group leader are officially open. They opened up today. For anyone who might not know or be aware, the group leader program is a 1-year volunteer term that basically gives people in the Wild Labs community the opportunity to lead subgroups on Wild Labs to create sort of spaces for meaningful engagement, community involvement, collaboration. And it's a great opportunity for people across all career stages, anyone who's looking to make a positive impact in their field or to gain exposure or to strengthen their community management or leadership experience. And that comes with some cool perks like being able to feed into Wild Labs feature development and having a sort of direct line of communication with the Wild Labs team, as well as what everybody is most concerned about, getting a special badge to delineate your leadership status. So applications are open through Friday, June 20th. So I encourage anybody who's interested to read the announcement article, which That link should be getting popped into the chat around now. To learn more about what that leadership program entails, roles and responsibilities, and also to hear some nice things that people from last year's cohort have to say about their experience. And I think we actually have Frank in the call right now, and he's a funding and finance group leader in the 2024 to 2025 term. So I encourage anybody who's interested in learning more or potentially applying to check out that article. And similarly, if you are interested in starting a new group on WildLabs, whether that be a specific tech type or a regional group, now is the time to also apply to open and lead a new group. So if you want to know more about what's needed to submit that application, there is an announcement article on WildLabs as well, and the link should be in the chat too. I can't see anything, but I trust that it's being sent. And that article is a way to learn more about what's needed, including making a post into the WildLabs community about sort of gauging interest and in joining or starting this new group. So that is it for announcements, and now it is quiz time. Since, like I said, I think there's like a subtle forest theme happening in today's variety hour, so I went ahead and made a quiz about sort of forest related things. As always, disclaimer, if you feel that the answers to any of these questions are wrong, I apologize in advance, and feel free to message me about it because I like to learn and correct my mistakes. So question 1, what type of forest is found near the equator? Oh, also, sorry, I think I'm going to need help from someone else on the WildLabs team to help co-run this quiz, whether that be managing the chat or looking at questions. So I hope someone's able to do that.
Sure.
Question 1. Thank you, Vane. What type of forest is found near the equator and has the highest biodiversity levels? Is it a temperate forest, tropical rainforest, boreal forest, or mangrove forest?
We have D, one answer so far from Fran. Some bees, mostly bees.
So bees.
Yes,
And the lone
just
D
one
from
D
Frank
and
Amanda.
2 Ds.
Okay, well,
And
we're starting off a little easy. It is B, tropical rainforest. It's gonna get harder though. Don't doubt it. Question 2. Which remote sensing technology is particularly effective for mapping forest biomass and structure at a large scale? Is it synthetic aperture radar, RFID tagging, Wi-Fi geolocation, or GPS tracking?
a lot of A's. Only A's.
Okay, anyone want to be bold and guess something else? I can't see the chat, and I see that Frank said
All of the above.
Frank always takes a big swing, and I love that about him. And unfortunately, he's wrong. It is a synthetic aperture radar. Also, just a note, sometimes I think that a quiz is hard because I don't know the answers to certain things, but then I find out that most people in the community do know the answer. And that's the magic of making a quiz. Question 3. How are unmanned aerial vehicles, aka UAVs or drones, being innovatively used in forest biodiversity monitoring? To disperse chemicals that mimic animal calls? That's crazy. To transport researchers into canopy zones? Also a little crazy. Capturing high-resolution imagery and thermal data? Or detecting forest sounds from above the canopy? A lot of C's. I'm going to be honest, this is not my strongest quiz, but it happens. There's still time to maybe trick some people. I am seeing that everyone's guessing C. And it doesn't seem like they're guessing. It seems like they know it. And that's correct. C is the answer. UAVs are being used to capture high-resolution imagery and thermal data for species and habitat mapping. Next question is, sorry, the numbers are not correct. Which is not a real combination of satellite constellations used to monitor forest cover change? Is it Sentinel-2 and PlanetScope, Landsat and MODIS, GPS and Newton, or I don't know how to say this, GOES, I guess, and Himawari?
C's, a lot of C's.
I thought I was being clever.
Okay.
All right. So a lot of people know the answers to all of these questions. And C and D, that's a different answer. Well, the answer is C, GPS and Newton. Apparently GPS and Galileo is a real thing, so I just changed it from one science history person to another, and I didn't trick anyone. So that's okay. And I think this is the last question. Which platform integrates satellite data, AI, and machine learning to detect deforestation and issue early warnings? Is it Forest Guard AI, Amazon Watch, Earthtime, or Global Forest Watch? I'm seeing a D. I'm seeing an A with a question mark.
Oh, this is the hardest one. A.
Oh, I'm happy that there's at least one hard one. Nice. Okay, we're getting a big mix of answers.
But most are A, I think.
And the answer is D, Global Forest Watch. I feel like I redeemed myself by having a hard question that some people. Well, that concludes the ad break. Again, like I said, it's hard to make a quiz every month, but thank you for thank you for playing along. And now it's time to move into our last speaker for today, which is going to be our long talk from Ben Weinstein. And he's going to be sharing more about DeepForest, which is a Python package for airborne object detection focused on biodiversity monitoring. So Ben, whenever you're ready, share your screen and take it away.
So good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. I want to take a little bit of time to talk about DeepForest, which is a Python package that we've been building for a number of years now on covering airborne object detection, mostly from unmanned aerial vehicles, but as well as manned aircraft, and less so satellite. And one of the things that DeepForest grew out of was a project with the National Ecological Observatory Network, NEON, to build a model for tree detection in 10 centimeter imagery for the NEON sites in the United States. It's a very large group of about 45 sites with simultaneous data collection for biodiversity as well as airborne data collection. And so we made that tree model available a number of years ago. I won't go into the technical details of it, but it's a semi-supervised deep learning model utilizing LiDAR pre-training and then RGB hand annotations. And DeepForest is this funny thing because when we first made it, we didn't really realize what we were doing in the sense that it was never our intent to build a tree detection model for being applied to everywhere on Earth. It was really meant specifically for NEON sites. But what happened was that within just a few weeks, we were getting dozens and then hundreds and then just again and again over month periods downloads, trying to apply it to all sorts of forests, all sorts of tree types, all sorts of different things. And so it became really clear to us that the community needed something that, in fact, we had not really trained for. And so DeepForest itself grew out of this need that the community drove us towards a tree detection model at a global scale across resolutions. But the truth is we were still working on NEON. And so we kind of kept working on NEON sites. So we have a visualization server up that's worth looking at if you want to look at 100 million tree crown predictions. We worked on tree species classification for 80 species in the NEON sites. And we had this tree detection algorithm, but there was this funny mismatch between sort of what we were working on and then what the community kept sort of adopting it for. And so we started to really try to build DeepForest as a Python package where you could fine tune a tree detection algorithm to your local sites. We never think of the tree detection algorithm in DeepForest as a zero-shot tool for anywhere on Earth. I'll talk about that a little bit at the end. But it was this fun dichotomy between our sort of normal day-to-day research and then this open source tool becoming ever more used. We were developing these broad scale predictions of tree species in different sites in the United States. And I think these pictures are super beautiful and really interesting from a macroecology perspective about looking at tree species distributions at these broad scales. You see things that are genuinely Poisson random distributions and then these highly patterned environmental structures, things like water. These are like water channels, for example, with these different species, or elevation gradients. You're looking at a ridge versus things that are nearly random distributions in the landscape. And so we were interested in studying these different tree species patterns and tree species maps within the broad landscape. But deep forest kept kind of coming up as a thing that needed to be worked on. And so we developed some expertise in computer vision for airborne object detection. And we kept looking around for what are the other pieces that people need. And so I think in 2022, we spent some time building a bird detection model. So this was for airborne object detection of just a single class bird. And we developed, I think it was 13 or 14 different projects that we went around looking for open data for tree detection was a starting point, and then we built from that tree detection model a bird detector. And so it really was a nice lesson in how fine-tuning from one environmental algorithm can be used for another algorithm. And so starting from tree detection, we built a bird detecting algorithm. And this thing has been used again, hundreds of times now in a place that we just weren't really expecting. And so we're continuing to sort of build our own research program, but at the same time, using DeepForest as an open source tool. In our own work, we're working on restoration and monitoring in the Everglades. We're part of this very long-term project started by Peter Frederick in the 1970s, where they were surveying 6 species of conservation concern. These are large egrets and ibises in the Everglades. And the task was to count all these birds in the colonies and try to get an understanding of nest detection and nest success. And so we've been flying drones through our field teams. A great credit goes to Lindsay Garner and the field team's work. It's incredible to watch someone land a drone on an airboat next to you. It's quite something to see. And so we have 1 centimeter imagery for a lot of bird colonies, and we were developing tools to count birds as well as try to estimate nests. And so I wanted to share this briefly because I think it might be a tool that others could use. Imagine that you have a set of orthomosaics and you go back to the same site every week or every month, for example, depending on your nest frequency. If you look and you have them georeferenced, you could overlay them and use the detections from our bird detection algorithm to look at how often birds are found in the same place. So if you imagine you have 8 orthomosaics, each taken in a different week, and you overlay all of them, you might imagine that if a bird's in the exact same location or within a couple meters in, say, 6 of the 8 weeks, that might be good evidence that there's a nest there. Why would there be a bird in the exact same location over time? And so when we have these georeferenced objects, we can start to estimate nest frequency and nest success. And so we've gone and validated this using field surveys, and we're more than 75% accurate in detecting nest locations. And from that, we can get time series of nest success. And you can imagine that we're now monitoring, 5,000, 10,000 nests at once, about which ones fail, which ones start, all these different environmental features that are associated with them. So I thought this was a nice example of how computer vision algorithms can be combined with sort of traditional ecological tools. And I'm happy to share, and we're always interested in collaborators here if you're interested in the ecology here. I think there's a lot of statistical work to be done in the hierarchical Bayesian world about these kinds of developmental models in collaboration with airborne computer vision. So just moving briefly through other pieces of deep forest, because we just start with trees and we're with birds. We have a livestock model, which is relatively under-tested for things like cattle and other pieces. And what I would really love from the community is if you could go to Deep Forest and the GitHub repo and just start listing what are the kinds of data sets we need, what are the kinds of models we need. We're interested in these broad scale detector models, not necessarily individual species classification, because there's 10,000 species on Earth that we might make a detector for. So we're interested in these broad scale models and how we best serve the community. And so we would love to hear from everyone about how to build airborne models that best suit people's needs. We annotate data, and I was sort of saying before that we never think of these models as zero-shot tools. So there are fine-tuning tools within Deep Forest, very simple, 8 to 10 lines of code where you can open a Deep Forest model and then annotate your own data and then fine-tune for your specific ecotype. And that vastly improves the model performance. We're not really at a place for zero-shot generalization at the global scale yet. Deep Forest is this funny thing, and anyone who knows me knows that I have like endless sort of concerns about it, which is that sometimes it feels like a very simple thing that it is not worth a ton of our time. And then it consistently has this uptake that we don't always know how to explain. So we're at 5,000 downloads a month, nearly over 200,000 downloads now. And we try our best to understand which are bots and which are real people. But it seems to have consistent usage for both the tree and bird and livestock models. And so if there are deep forest users in the room here, and I recognize a couple people, please let us know, how we can make it better. DeepForest 2.0 will be coming out soon with a vastly improved tree model in collaboration with the World Resources Institute, and Global Forest Watch was mentioned earlier. We work very closely with WRI, and it's this interesting piece about how we build community around simple tools and thinking about what deep forest needs to be to make it available to a large audience. Because I think what is really important here and for this conversation is how we talk about sort of building community. I'm working on a number of benchmarks, and I'll talk about Million Trees in a second, but I'm working on similar things with wildlife as well. And trying to understand the data sharing process and what expectations users have for attribution and data storage and data sharing, especially in the airborne object detection community, is still really difficult and involves a lot of personal relationships. And so I spent a lot of time emailing hundreds of authors. Hey, can you make your data available? Can you make your data available? What would it take to make your data available? If we destroy the geospatial location so that no one could tell where it's from, so that the annotations are only referenced to the upper left corner, how do we think about reducing duplication? There are a number of packages out there and how we create interoperability. So I'm in conversation with the Torch Geo community, for example, on occasion, trying to think about what that would take. PyTorch Wildlife is working in some similar areas as well. And so trying to build that sense that we are in this together is a very important and I think underrated part of this. And so I'll talk a little bit about Million Trees that'll kind of emphasize this. So I'm currently working on the Million Trees benchmark. It is a very large effort funded by the World Resources Institute to try to come up with more than 1 million, we're already at 1 million, views of trees from annotated airborne data. So that's polygons, points from drones, from manned aircraft, a little bit from satellite, although individual trees from satellite continues to be a bit of an open question about what's worth doing there. And so we're looking for field verified data. So if anyone here has geospatial data of tree locations and corresponding airborne imagery, we would love to include you. Everyone is welcome to be an author on the first submission. As I said, we destroy the geospatial location for the data so that no one can use your data in any other capacity. We don't take any species data or DBH data. We're just looking at tree location right now. And the goal is to try to release a large benchmark that measures performance as deep forest users have been doing on zero-shot global airborne tree detection. And so if you train a model in Malawi, how does it generalize to Mozambique? If you train a model in England, how does it generalize to Australia? These are the kinds of questions that we don't really know as a community right now, and how the best way to adapt these pieces. So we're at, I think, 1.2 million tree views. It's not exactly 1.2 million trees because sometimes we have multiple airborne slices of the same tree. So those are different views, but they are the same tree. So it's a little bit hard to know exactly how to count the numbers, but it's a lot. But the truth is, and I was talking about community building, I think it's only a 20th of what's out there. If I had to guess, and knowing all the people and knowing the conversations. So if anyone here works with Forest Geo, we haven't had a lot of inroads there and necessarily geo trees as well. And so there are large efforts that exist, but we haven't been able to create the kind of collaboration that we're looking for to kind of build a community around these kind of ideas. And so I think that there's probably 25 million views out there that have already been annotated, and we have about 1 million of them. So that's good, but I would say not great. And so thinking about how to move forward and create collaboration and the right kind of attribution, because the view of the benchmark is to try to create a kind of broader understanding of what it would take to build models that generalize across space. Right now in machine learning, for example, if you take an off-the-shelf machine learning algorithm, you might have a point model or a polygon model or a box model, right? So you have a neural network which incorporates information about a specific geometry type. But if we step back, that's kind of absurd. If a model knows something about tree boxes, it also knows something about tree polygons. It also knows something about tree centers. And so we want to design a benchmark that transcends this annotation geometry and allows us to capture data from a broad array of tools. And so instead of designing a benchmark for what existing algorithms look like, Mask CNN takes in polygons and RetinaNets takes in boxes, we want to promote this idea that we need algorithms that are annotation agnostic or annotation geometry agnostic and incorporate lots of different types of information. And so some of these token-based models that have been promoted in the remote sensing imagery community are really interesting for that reason and trying to encode information from multiple geometry types, because that's the only way we're going to get a truly global model is to incorporate information from all these different pieces. And so that's the sort of one way we're building community. I want to also promote that we are thinking about a similar, I'm going to call it like million animals benchmark, where we're looking for airborne object detection for wildlife at a global scale. And so trying to rally the community around the same idea. This would be a Python package. You would pip install a million trees and you get the data and you load it automatically. And so you just say, hey, I want the data for this country, and you're going to get it loaded there. And so we're thinking about the same thing for wildlife. We've identified 276 different teams with wildlife data from airborne perspectives. And we haven't contacted that many yet just because we're thinking about building this into our next grant cycle. But if you're interested in building an airborne object detection model for global wildlife detection, a little bit the way Megadetector works on camera traps, where it's sort of organism agnostic, that's something that we're interested in as well, and creating community around this. And the last way we're creating community is credit to Wild Labs. The Wild Labs Boring Fund 2025 funded an AI development workshop in Latin America that we just finished in April. That went really well. And I want to stress to everyone here, I think one of the takeaways is that this stuff is possible in a diverse set of different countries. And I think we've really proven that you can find 25 to 30 people in almost any major city in the world at this point who are interested in AI development for biodiversity. And so we were really surprised about the quality of the students, the commitment of the students. We did 4 days, one on camera traps, one on airborne data, one on bioacoustics, and we showed how to build models, how to share data, how to build general reproducible knowledge using GitHub. And so it was a really successful effort that we're thinking about expanding. I want to thank my contributors as well as my co-collaborators. I think I saw Jose Ruiz here on the call. It was a really amazing effort, and I think it's something that can be replicated. So if you're interested in knowing kind of what course materials we used, please check out the website. And we would love to see this repeated in other places for developing AI talent. The students were really amazing, and it was really a huge success. And I think with that, I was supposed to do 15 minutes, and I did 16 minutes. So despite me talking incredibly fast, I still was over. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. I feel like according to my clock, you do have 1 minute until we're at the hour.
What can you do? That's okay. I'll take anybody got a question for a minute. There you go.
I have a question, but I want to give other people the opportunity to ask a question because I fear that mine might be not the main takeaway of your talk. So I'll give everyone a moment to think. And if not, I'll jump on it. All right, I'll go. And forgive me if you mentioned this or if this is a stupid question. What are people using the livestock model for?
We've just put it out. It happened as a Google Summer of Code student contribution. So we had a GSOC student develop this, and then we kind of contributed it. And so there's this idea of counting cattle as a way of understanding agroforestry practices as well as deforestation drivers. And so I'm mostly focused right now on drone and manned aircraft because I think that's where the high resolution data is. I am not at all convinced about satellite data. It's strange. I think everyone assumes that I'm working in satellites, and frankly, we're just not there yet with resolution and data processing. And so I'm really understanding that there's a desire to do, cattle detection. How many cattle are there in in Manaus, right? There's like there's a desire to want that question. And we're not there yet from drones and manned aircraft. And so ready to do satellite is not quite there. But there's this huge desire, as you can imagine, for deforestation drivers for livestock detection. I've also been told that, frankly, that there's just there's a undercounting and lack of understanding by major agencies about how many livestock are on their lands. I spoke to someone from the Department of Interior in the United States and the Bureau of Land Management, and both of them expressed the same kind of idea that they're not totally clear about the number of livestock which are foraging on any given time in any given place. And so flying drones over those areas may be interesting. But given the vastness of those areas, we're still thinking about data collection and how that was actually possible. But there is this, I think, mismatch between monitoring agencies and then individual livestock movements that we still don't have a good grasp of, in what season and what phenology and where they're moving. And so that was part of our idea of supporting those efforts. But data acquisition still remains a very interesting question, especially given that satellite's not quite there yet.
Yeah, very interesting. I feel like I've been learning a lot more about the needs of integrating tech with livestock and especially specifically cattle, like management in North America specifically over the last few months. And it's very interesting. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for implementing useful tech.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's
ahead.
two ways. And I'd love if anyone else has any feedback here, because the ranching community is actually getting quite technical. You wouldn't necessarily have anticipated that community would be highly technical, but the like large ranching community is getting much more technical. And so we actually, from the commercial side, get people interested in these kind of tools. And then the management side is actually not quite as technical and is still using more traditional methods, as well as, like, you can imagine that if you're a rancher, you don't love drones flying over your cattle herds. It's not the right ethos. And so it's funny, there's a little bit of mismatch between the economic incentives of large sort of business as well as the management side of it. And actually, I feel like they're going in slightly different directions. We hear a lot more inquiries, frankly, from the like commercial space than we do from the Bureau of Land Management.
Feels like government's always a few steps behind. So that tracks. I know we're over time and I would love to continue this conversation. But really quickly, just before anybody has to jump off, thank you to everyone for joining and for our speakers and their awesome, amazing, engaging, informative presentations. I'm going to end the recording now, but everybody is invited, if you're available, to stick around for our after hours, where we have a more sort of casual conversation about, sometimes it's about the topics of today's talks, sometimes it's about other stuff, oftentimes it is about other stuff. So thank you again, everyone, for coming, and we will see you next month on June 25th.